I'm standing on my balcony at dawn, watching the city wake up, when I whisper the words I've been rehearsing for months. Love isn't for me anymore. And then I hear him laugh, that low, dangerous laugh that makes my blood run cold. And I realize he's been standing in his own yard next door the entire time. You'll be mine eventually, he says. And I understand in that moment that I've made a terrible mistake. I've just told the one man who cannot accept rejection that I'm finally giving up on love, and he's taking it as an invitation. My name is Isabella, and I've spent the last 5 years drowning in men who couldn't love me properly. The first one cheated. The second one couldn't commit. The third one was married and didn't tell me. By the time I reached 30 years old, I've convinced myself that love is a fairy tale sold to people desperate enough to believe in it. So I move into a quiet apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, and I tell myself that solitude is the same as peace. That's when I meet him. His name is Nathaniel, and he appears in my life like a character in a movie. Impossibly handsome, impossibly charming, impossibly interested in me. He introduces himself when I'm bringing groceries in, and his smile is warm enough to feel dangerous. I've seen you around, he says, and there's something in his tone that suggests he's been watching me for far longer than I've noticed him. I'm Nathaniel. I live next door. Isabella. I respond. Try to ignore the flutter in my chest that suggests my body hasn't received a memo about my decision to stop believing in love. He helps me with my groceries, and we talk for 3 hours standing in my kitchen. He asks about my work as a therapist. He asks about my dreams. He asks about the sadness. He says he can see in my eyes even when I'm smiling. You've been hurt, he observes, and he says it like a fact rather than a question. Everyone's been hurt. I respond carefully. But not everyone's decided to stop trying. He says, you're the kind of person who's decided that love isn't worth the risk. I can see it in the way you hold yourself, like you're braced for impact. I should tell him he's wrong. I should maintain boundaries. Instead, I invite him to dinner. Over the following weeks, Nathaniel becomes a fixture in my life. He brings flowers. He remembers small details I've mentioned. He looks at me like I'm the most fascinating person he's ever met. And slowly, imperceptibly, my walls begin to crack. But there's something beneath his charm that doesn't quite fit. Something that flickers in his expression when I mention meeting a colleague for coffee. Something cold in his voice when I talk about maintaining my independence. You need people who will love you completely, he says one night. Not these casual friendships. Not this idea that you need space. You need someone who will make sure you never feel alone again. That's not healthy, I say, echoing my own professional knowledge back to him. Love isn't healthy, he responds. Love is obsession. Love is the need to possess something completely. Everything else is just companionship. I should hear the warning in those words. I should recognize the philosophy of a man who sees relationships as ownership. But I'm so tired of being alone that I convince myself he's just being romantic. That's when I make the decision to end it. I can't do this anymore, I tell him one evening. I don't think we're good for each other. He goes very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that love isn't for me anymore. I'm saying that I've decided to stop trying. I'm saying that I think you should go and find someone who's able to give you what you need. He stares at me for a long moment, and then he smiles, and it's the saddest, most terrifying smile I've ever seen. You'll be mine eventually, he says, and he leaves. I tell myself that's the end of it. I tell myself that I've done the right thing. But over the following weeks, I begin to notice things. Nathaniel appears everywhere I go. At the grocery store, at my office, at my favorite coffee shop. He's always smiling, always casual, always making it clear that our proximity is a matter of coincidence rather than obsession. But it's not coincidence. It's calculation. When I start dating again, trying to prove to myself that my decision was the right one, Nathaniel arranges to accidentally meet my date at a bar. He tells the man stories about me that are technically true, but strategically framed to make me sound unstable. By the end of the evening, my date has decided he's not interested. It happens 3 times before I understand that Nathaniel is systematically destroying my chances of happiness with anyone else. Stop. I beg him one night when I confront him at his apartment. Just leave me alone. I can't, he says, and there's genuine anguish in his voice. Because I love you, Isabella. And love doesn't stop just because someone says it's over. That's not love. That's obsession. Maybe they're the same thing, he says. Maybe what you call obsession is just love that's too big to be contained. He moves closer, and I'm trapped between desire to run and the desire to fall into his arms. Because underneath the manipulation, underneath the obsession, there's a version of Nathaniel who genuinely cares. And that version is harder to resist than the monster. When he kisses me, I don't pull away. What follows is a descent into a relationship that's become impossible to escape. He's woven himself into every aspect of my life. He knows my schedule. He knows my password. He knows how to manipulate my emotions to make sure I stay. And I let him, because I've convinced myself that this is what love looks like. That obsession is just passion that's been misnamed. That possession is protection. My best friend, Rachel, confronts me one day over coffee. "You're not yourself anymore," she says. "You become smaller. You become his." He loves me. I defend. He owns you, she corrects. And you're confusing the two. But I can't hear her. I'm too far gone. I'm too addicted to the feeling of being needed so completely that I convince myself I can't exist without him. That's when I find out about Emma. I discover her by accident. I'm using Nathaniel's laptop to check my email when I see her name in his browser history, Emma, and the search history reveals dozens of pages about her. Her Instagram, her LinkedIn, her Facebook profile. She's beautiful in a way that suggests she's everything I'm not. Confident, independent, unburdened by the weight of Nathaniel's obsession. When I confront him, he doesn't deny it. "I was looking into her as a possibility," he says calmly. "In case you ever decided to leave again, I need to know my options." "Your options?" I repeat, and I'm not sure if I'm horrified or betrayed or both. I'm not interchangeable, Nathaniel. I'm not someone you can replace with someone else just because I'm having doubts. "Everyone's replaceable," he says. "But I prefer you. You're more pliant, more willing to accept my version of love." The words are like a mirror, reflecting back everything I've ignored about our relationship. The manipulation, the isolation, the way he systematically dismantled my ability to see clearly. I pack a bag and leave that night. I go to Rachel's house, and I stay there while I process the reality of what I've allowed to become. But Nathaniel doesn't accept the ending. He shows up at my office. He calls from different numbers when I block him. He leaves gifts and notes that are loving and threatening in equal measure. He tells anyone who will listen that I'm mentally unstable, that I need him, that I'm making a terrible mistake by leaving. And then he does something that destroys everything. He sends evidence to my employer. Photos of me at his apartment. Emails I sent him in moments of weakness. He recontextualizes every expression of affection as proof that I'm unable to maintain professional boundaries. He suggests that as a therapist, I'm a danger to my own clients. I'm suspended pending investigation. The police issue a restraining order, but it's clear that Nathaniel has already won. He's destroyed my career, my reputation, and my ability to believe that any relationship I have in the future won't be similarly contaminated by his presence. I check into a psychiatric hospital voluntarily because the alternative is giving in to the darkness that's consuming me. I spend 3 months there confronting the reality of what I've become. I confront the fact that I allowed myself to be used, that I confuse obsession with love, that I confuse control with care. And I finally begin to understand that the problem isn't Nathaniel's obsession. The problem is my willingness to be obsessed over. The lawsuit that follows is brutal. Nathaniel claims I'm a scorned ex-girlfriend trying to destroy his reputation with false accusations. I'm forced to testify about our relationship in a courtroom, while he sits there with a sympathetic expression, occasionally looking wounded. The judge doesn't believe me, or doesn't believe that what happened constitutes a crime. Either way, I walk out of that courtroom understanding that justice isn't always just. I move to another city. I change my name professionally. I rebuild my practice from nothing, taking only clients who've experienced obsessive relationships. And slowly I begin to heal. But Nathaniel doesn't accept the distance. 5 years after our relationship ended, he appears at my office. He looks older. There's a weariness in his expression that suggests he's finally begun to understand the consequence of his actions. "I'm not here to hurt you," He says immediately, I'm here because I finally understand what I did, and I need you to know that I'm sorry. No, I say, you don't get to do this. You don't get to peer in my life and pretend that an apology fixes anything. I know it doesn't fix it, he says, but I've spent the last 5 years in therapy understanding why I needed to possess you completely, understanding that my obsession came from a place of deep insecurity, understanding that what I called love was really just terror that you would leave me. That's good for you. I respond coldly. That's growth. But it doesn't change the fact that you spent years making my life impossible. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life being sorry for that. He stands to leave, and he looks smaller somehow, diminished. I just wanted you to know that you were right. You were right that love isn't for you, at least not with me, and I'm truly sorry that I couldn't accept that. After he leaves, I sit in my office for hours, and I realize something that's been growing quietly underneath my hurt and anger. I finally completely let go of him. The obsession he created in me has finally died, and in its place, there's something clean, something empty but not hollow, something that suggests I might someday be capable of actual love again. 2 years later, I meet someone. Her name is Sophie, and she's a violinist who understands the language of emotion in a way that only artists can. She doesn't try to own me. She doesn't try to merge completely with me. She simply shows up every day and chooses to build something with me. And I'm capable of receiving that love because I finally learned the difference between obsession and devotion, between possession and protection, between the fantasy of love and the reality of it. On our wedding day, I see Nathaniel in the back of the church. He's alone, watching with an expression that suggests he's finally made peace with the fact that I'm not his, that I never was. That real love doesn't require ownership. After the ceremony, he approaches me and Sophie. I'm happy for you, he says, and I believe him. I'm genuinely happy that you found someone who can love you the way you deserve. Thank you, I say, and I mean it, because his absence has become as important as his presence once was. Because I've learned to love myself enough to not need to be needed so completely. As I walk away with Sophie's hand in mine, I whisper a final goodbye to the woman I was, the woman who needed to be saved, the woman who confused obsession with passion. And I greet the woman I become, someone capable of giving love without requiring possession in return, and that, finally, is a happy ending.